now we tackle the free will question. You know, I was reading a book recently and it asked the question, do we have free will? And if you don't think we do, please turn to page 3. Turn to page 3, it says, gotcha. Point being that we all have a basic awareness that we are making decisions that are ours and that we have at least some significant measure of freedom. The question really becomes is how does this play into theological issues? Because on the one hand, you have the Reformed point of view that says God chooses us. On the other hand, people will point out, well, the scripture says that we should choose God. So how does all this work? And if you believe that God chooses us, then that somehow seems to deny the concept of free choice on our part. So let me lay some foundation for you so you can think about how this works together with your individual theology. What almost never happens in these conversations about predestination and free will, at least theological predestination, salvation, etc., and free will, is what is free will? And there are basically 3 different categories. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not satisfied with these classical categories, but I don't have a 4th, and I'm probably not smart enough to hash one out. So I'll just give you the 3 that are characteristically part of this conversation. The first category is determinism. Determinism is just picture a bunch of dominoes falling. They're events that are caused by prior events. Boom, 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 boom. No mind, no decisions of any kind, just things happening. This is the way the natural world works. Apart from consciousness, you have a deterministic set of events, and if you set up the dominoes in exactly the same way, they're going to fall in exactly the same way every single time because they are determined based on the physical setup. That's why science works the way it does. That's why you can have scientific repeatability. So that's determinism. No choices are made of any kind. Things just happen. Then you have freedom. It turns out there are 2 different types of freedom, 2 different ways of defining freedom, and these are important depending on how your theology goes. So let me give you the first one, because both definitions trade on basic intuitions that we have about what it's like to make a free choice. The first definition of freedom is you do what you want. Your choice is free if you are doing the choosing and you're doing what you want. You're not being forced by some exterior thing that causes you to do what you do. Instead, you're just choosing. It's your choice. Fine. Most people think that's a pretty good way of characterizing freedom of the will. We exercise our will, and if we can do what we want, then our act is free. Okay? Now, some are not satisfied with that, and there are reasons for this. They want to add another condition. That is, freedom of the will entails, much of the time, doing what you want, but it also needs to entail the possibility of doing something else. It could be that you are doing what you want, but if you have no real possibility of doing some other thing instead, then that's not considered real freedom. So this idea of you could have done otherwise is a condition that many people will add to freedom. It's called the CDO condition, the could have done otherwise condition. And if you are doing what you want and you could have done otherwise, that is a more refined understanding of freedom. So let's give these names just for the sake of clarity. So you have determinism, then you have, on the other end, you have doing what you want and you could have done otherwise. That seems like a very robust understanding of freedom, and that's called libertarian freedom. And then you have this hybrid in the middle, that you're doing what you want, but you couldn't have done otherwise. That is, your wants are determined by other things, even though you're choosing what you want to do. Your wants themselves are determined. Maybe they're determined by a fallen nature. Maybe when you sin, you're doing what you want, but it's not the case that you could have done otherwise. Maybe when you are eating chocolate ice cream, you're doing what you want, but just to be belligerent, you could eat mustard if you wanted, if you chose to. Not if you wanted to. You don't want to, but you could choose to. So you could have done otherwise. And so you can see the different variations of these senses of freedom. Now, I actually believe that all things are in operation. that there are some things that are determined. That is, our molecules are like dominoes falling in a certain way according to their chemistry and natural law, and we don't make any decisions about those kinds of things. There are other things that I seem to make decisions on, and I could have done otherwise, so I believe that there are libertarian freedoms that we have when we're trying to make decisions about things. But there also seem to me, and you can decide for yourself on this, that there are some things that I do because I want to do them, but I couldn't have done otherwise. I don't think it's possible for us to live a sinless life. I seem to want to sin, and sometimes I want to do right, but even when I want to sin and I do the sinful things, these are things that are to some degree dictated by my nature. Now, how that all plays out in our theology is a complex kind of notion. But when you're addressing the question of free will, think of these different categories: strict determinism, strict libertarian freedom, and then right in the middle, I don't think I gave this a name, but it's called compatibilism, or maybe soft determinism. That is, yes, some of the things are determined by your desires, otherwise. And in that mix, you're going to find a place for your particular theology, and that's really the more complex question. But those are the categories that you're working with.